The steady drip of condensation from the ceiling marked time in the abandoned sector of Carroll Station. Marcus counted each drop as it fell, creating small ripples in the puddle below. 17, 18, 19. The rhythm had become his companion during the long shifts of isolation. Carroll Station had once been a marvel of engineering, a bustling hub at the crossroads of three major space lanes. Now, only the Shanghai ward remained partially operational, its systems gradually failing despite Marcus's best efforts. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting unstable shadows across the corroded metal walls. The air carried the distinct scent of ionized copper and musty dampness, a constant reminder of the station's decay. For 3 years, Marcus had been the sole permanent resident of this section. Other maintenance workers rotated through on brief assignments, but none stayed longer than necessary. The station's reputation as a ghost port kept most away. Marcus preferred it that way. His daily routine never varied. Wake at 0600, check atmospheric levels, repair the most critical system failures, consume his ration pack, then continue with secondary maintenance until sleep. The only sounds that broke the silence were the occasional warning sirens and the mechanical hum of life support. Today marked day 1092 of his assignment. Marcus had just finished recalibrating the climate control system when the station's computer announced, "Warning, external temperature dropping below sustainable levels. Sector 7 shows oxygen fluctuation. Recommend immediate inspection." He sighed, gathering his tools. Sector 7 housed the auxiliary life support, and its failure would mean evacuation, something the company had been looking for as an excuse to abandon the station entirely. As he made his way through the dimly lit corridors, Marcus contemplated the emptiness of his existence. He had chosen this isolation after what happened on Europa. Here, at least, his mistakes couldn't harm others. The company had been only too happy to assign him to this forgotten outpost. A human failsafe was cheaper than automated systems, especially for a station they were gradually writing off. Reaching Sector 7, Marcus began his diagnostics. The oxygen levels were indeed fluctuating, but the cause wasn't immediately apparent. He would need to check the external sensors. Donning his environmental suit, he prepared to exit through the maintenance hatch. The procedure was routine. Secure the inner lock, equalize pressure, open the outer door. But as Marcus reached for the control panel, something unprecedented happened. A sound broke through the silence. 3 distinct knocks on the outer hatch. Marcus froze. No scheduled deliveries were due for another 2 weeks. Emergency response teams would have announced themselves through official channels. For several minutes, he stood motionless, convinced he had imagined it. Then it came again, 3 deliberate knocks, weaker this time. Station protocols were explicit. Unscheduled visitors were to be reported immediately to Security Command. Contact was forbidden until proper clearance was established. But Security Command hadn't responded to his transmissions in months, and something about the weakening pattern of the knocks compelled him to act. Marcus overrode the safety protocols and cracked the outer hatch, just enough to peer through. What he saw defied his expectations. Huddled against the metal frame was a humanoid figure, wrapped in what appeared to be improvised thermal foil. The being's skin, visible at the edges of the makeshift covering, had a silvery blue tint. Its eyes, large, reflective, and unmistakably non-human, stared back at him with an intensity that made him step back. For the first time in years, Marcus faced a choice that wasn't dictated by station protocols. Close the hatch and report the encounter, or respond to the desperation evident in those alien eyes. "Please," came a whispered word, barely audible through the narrow opening. The being's lips moved in a manner surprisingly similar to human speech. "Cold." The temperature outside was dropping rapidly. Without proper protection, no living creature could survive more than a few hours. Marcus thought of the empty station behind him, the countless, unused cabins, the surplus of supplies meant for a crew that would never return. Against every regulation, Marcus opened the hatch wider. "Come inside," he said, the words feeling strange after so long without speaking aloud to another being. Quickly, the figure hesitated, then slipped through the opening. As Marcus sealed the hatch behind them, he realized he had just broken the cardinal rule of outer station management. But watching the being sink to the floor, shivering violently beneath its flimsy covering, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. "Stay here," Marcus instructed, voice rough from disuse. "I'll get something warm." He hurried to his quarters, grabbing the emergency thermal blanket from his survival kit. When he returned, the being hadn't moved, except to draw its knees closer to its chest. Marcus approached slowly and offered the blanket. "This will help with the cold." Cautiously, the being reached out. Its fingers were long and delicate, with an extra joint that allowed them to bend back upon themselves. As it took the blanket, Marcus noticed faint geometric patterns etched into the bluish skin. Not tattoos, but something that seemed to be part of the being's natural pigmentation. "Thank you," it said, the words accented but clear. The being wrapped the thermal blanket around its shoulders. Discarding the makeshift foil covering, Marcus stepped back, giving it space. "Can you understand me well?" "Yes," the being nodded. "I learned your language. Trading stations." "What's your name?" Marcus asked, keeping his distance. "They called me SA-117, the being replied. "But before everything, I was Sela." "Sela," Marcus repeated. "I'm Marcus." "Marcus," Sela echoed, the name sounding musical in her voice. "You are kind to open door. Many do not." The simplicity of the statement struck Marcus deeply. How many had turned this being away before it reached his station? How desperate must Sela have been to knock on the hatch of this obviously abandoned outpost? "Are you hungry?" he asked, avoiding the deeper questions for now. Sela nodded, a surprisingly human gesture. "Yes, long time without food." "Come with me." "But slowly. The gravity here might be different from what you're used to." Marcus led Sela through the corridors to the main living quarters. The being moved with careful precision, occasionally steadying itself against the wall. In the brighter light of the habitat section, Marcus could better observe his visitor. Sela stood slightly taller than him, with a slender frame that seemed almost fragile. The silvery blue skin had a subtle iridescence that shifted with movement. But most striking were the marks on Sela's exposed arms and neck. Some appeared to be natural patterns, but others were clearly scars, deliberate and systematic. In the galley, Marcus prepared a standard ration pack, unsure what would be safe for Sela to consume. "This is human food," he explained. "I don't know if it will agree with your system." Sela examined the offered tray, then carefully selected a protein cube, sniffing it before taking a small bite. After a moment of consideration, the being nodded. "Similar to station food. I can eat this." They ate in silence, an uncomfortable quiet that nevertheless felt less oppressive than the years of solitude Marcus had endured. Sela consumed the food methodically, with the careful discipline of someone accustomed to rationing. When finished, the being stared at the empty container for several long moments. "How did you get here?" Marcus finally asked. "There are no ships docked at the station." Sela's gaze remained fixed on the table. "Transport vessel. They discard unwanted cargo before inspection points." The implication was clear, and Marcus felt a cold anger rise within him. "They ejected you into space?" "Yes." Sela's voice was flat. "Thermal suit malfunction. I drift. 3 cycles. Found exterior handles on your station. Climbed a hatch." Marcus struggled to comprehend the ordeal. Surviving in space with a failing thermal suit, navigating to the station, finding handholds on the exterior. Each step seemed impossible. That's remarkable survival. My kind adapts, Sella said simply, but cannot survive much longer in void. Your kind? What species are you? Sella finally looked up, those reflective eyes studying Marcus with caution. Some call us Vithari. We are not common in this sector. The name meant nothing to Marcus. His knowledge of non-human species was limited to those he'd encountered during his previous assignments. I haven't heard of Vithari before. Better for us, Sella replied cryptically. Those who know of us often want parts. The statement hung in the air between them. Marcus didn't press further. Whatever Sella had endured, it was clear that trust would need to be earned gradually. You need rest, he said instead. There are empty quarters you can use, with a shower, if your species uses water for cleaning. Water is good, Sella confirmed. Very good. Marcus showed Sella to the nearest vacant cabin. It was standard issue, a sleeping platform, sanitation unit, and minimal storage. The shower controls are there, he explained, pointing. Hot water is limited to 5 minutes per cycle. I'll find you some clothes. Those thermals weren't designed for long-term wear. Thank you, Marcus, Sella said, the words carrying weight beyond their simplicity. Lock the door from inside, Marcus instructed. I'll knock 3 times when I return with clothes. As he walked back to his own quarters to find suitable garments, Marcus realized how profoundly his routine had been disrupted. For years, he had existed in perfect isolation, his days predictable and emotionless. Now, with a single decision to open a hatch, everything had changed. He should report Sella's presence to command, should follow the protocols for unauthorized arrivals. Instead, he searched through his spare uniforms, looking for anything that might fit Sella's taller frame. The next morning, Marcus woke to the unfamiliar sound of movement in the station. For a moment, panic seized him. Then he remembered his visitor. Rising quickly, he made his way to the galley, where he found Sella examining the food preparation unit with obvious curiosity. The being wore Marcus's spare maintenance coveralls, rolled at the ankles and wrists to accommodate the difference in height. With proper clothing and rest, Sella appeared less alien. The blue-silver skin seemed healthier, with a subtle luminescence that hadn't been visible before. Good morning, Marcus said, announcing his presence. Sella turned, those reflective eyes blinking in a sequence that suggested surprise. Morning. I did not mean to use without permission. It's fine, Marcus assured her. Everything here is available to you. Your generosity is unexpected, Sella said, head tilting slightly. Most humans see my kind as commodity, not guest. Marcus activated the food synthesizer, programming it for a standard breakfast. I don't know much about your species, but I know something about being stranded. They ate together, the silence less awkward than the previous evening. Marcus found himself studying Sella's movements, the precise way the being handled utensils, the careful sips of water, the occasional unconscious touch to the geometric patterns on exposed skin. Those markings, Marcus finally said, gesturing to Sella's wrist where the coverall had slipped up. Are they natural to your species? Sella's expression shifted subtly. The being traced a finger along a series of parallel lines near the wrist, are natural growth patterns. But these, touching a more geometric design on the forearm, are identification, ownership marks. Ownership, Marcus repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. Yes, Sella's gaze dropped. I was property, 7 cycles, research subject, then entertainment, then other uses. Marcus felt sick. He had heard rumors of black market trading in exotic species, but had assumed such practices were confined to the outer rim territories. How did you escape? Did not escape, Sella corrected, Was discarded. Value diminished when... The being paused, struggling with the words. When reproduction capabilities were damaged. The clinical description only made the horror more profound. Marcus found himself at a loss for how to respond. "I'm sorry," he finally said, knowing the inadequacy of the words. "You have no fault," Sella replied. "You show kindness. First kindness in many cycles." After breakfast, Marcus faced a dilemma. His maintenance schedule demanded attention. The station's systems wouldn't repair themselves, but he was reluctant to leave Sella alone. "I need to work on the life support systems today," he explained. "You're welcome to rest. Or..." "I can help," Sella offered. "Have knowledge of systems. Was used for maintenance before other purposes." Marcus hesitated. Station regulations strictly prohibited unauthorized personnel from accessing critical systems. But then, he had already broken the most fundamental rule by allowing Sella aboard. "All right, but stay close to me, and don't touch anything unless I say it's okay." Together, they made their way to Sector 7, where the oxygen fluctuations had been reported. As they worked, Marcus discovered that Sella indeed possessed considerable technical knowledge. The being could identify failing components with a glance and seemed to intuitively understand the station's aged systems. "How do you know so much about these old models?" Marcus asked, as Sella correctly diagnosed a fault in the atmospheric recycler that had eluded him for weeks. "Was stationed on similar platform. Proxima Outpost. 5 cycles maintenance duty." Sella's long fingers traced the corroded connectors. These systems, familiar. By midday, they had resolved the oxygen fluctuations and moved on to the climate control malfunctions in Sector 4. Working with Sella accelerated Marcus's usual pace significantly. Tasks that typically took days were completed in hours. More surprisingly, he found himself engaging in conversation, halting and brief at first, then gradually more fluid as the day progressed. He learned that Sella's species evolved on a planet with higher oxygen content and lower gravity, explaining the being's slender frame and careful movements in the station's environment. Vithari possessed natural empathic abilities through skin contact, a trait that made them valuable for certain types of research and entertainment. "We feel what others feel," Sella explained, carefully adjusting a temperature sensor. "Through touch, makes us desirable for those who want to be understood without speaking. That's why they..." Marcus couldn't finish the question. "Yes, among other reasons." Sella's tone made it clear the subject was painful. "Some humans believe our touch brings pleasure. Others think we can heal through empathy. Both partially true. Both used to justify ownership. As days passed, they fell into a routine. Mornings were spent repairing critical systems, afternoons on secondary maintenance, evenings in quiet conversation or shared silence. Marcus found himself sleeping better than he had in years, the crushing loneliness of the station somewhat alleviated by Sella's presence. He began to notice subtle changes in the being. Sella's movements became more fluid as adaptation to the station's gravity improved. The silvery blue skin developed a healthier sheen. Most noticeably, Sella began to initiate conversations rather than merely responding to questions. 2 weeks after Sella's arrival, they were working on the station's communication array, a system Marcus had deliberately neglected to repair fully. Sella noticed his hesitation as they approached the main transmitter. "You do not want contact with others," Sella observed. "Is why this system remains broken." Marcus paused, caught off guard by the accurate assessment. "The company doesn't care about this station anymore. They keep me here because it's cheaper than a full decommission. If the communications worked properly, they might actually have to respond to my reports. And send others," Sella added, understanding. "You prefer alone." "I did," Marcus admitted, "until recently." Sella's expression shifted in that subtle way that Marcus had come to recognize as the equivalent of a smile. I also prefer few people. Too many emotions when many humans together. Overwhelming for Vithari. Is that why you've never tried to touch me? Marcus asked, the question emerging before he could consider its implications. Because you would feel what I feel? Sela looked away. Yes. And because humans often react badly to Vithari touch. Fear of intrusion. Fear of what we might discover. I wouldn't mind, Marcus said quietly. If you wanted to. Sela's eyes widened slightly, the reflective quality catching the overhead lights. Are certain? Process is intimate. Marcus nodded. I'm sure. Slowly, with obvious caution. Sela extended a hand. Marcus removed his work glove and reached out. Their fingertips met, a brief contact that sent an unexpected warmth up Marcus's arm. Then Sela gently wrapped those long, jointed fingers around his hand. The sensation was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. A tingling energy seemed to flow between them, and he had the distinct impression of his emotional state being carefully examined, like books on a shelf being studied by a curious reader. Sela's eyes closed, the geometric patterns on the visible skin pulsing, subtly, with a bioluminescent glow. After several seconds, the being withdrew, those eyes opening to reveal an expression of profound sadness. So much pain, Sela whispered. So much guilt. Europa, the accident, the children. Marcus pulled back as if burned, his breath catching. You saw that? Not details. Feelings. Emotions attached to memories. Sela's voice was gentle. You blame yourself for many deaths. 37, Marcus said. The number seared into his consciousness. 37 people died because I miscalculated the oxygen requirements during the pressure failure. 7 of them were children from the colony school, visiting the facility that day. The confession hung in the recycled air between them. Marcus had never spoken of it aloud, not even during the investigation. He had accepted the assignment to Carroll Station immediately afterward, seeking the isolation as a form of self-imposed punishment. You have imprisoned yourself here, Sela observed. In this empty place. It seemed appropriate, Marcus replied. I couldn't bear to be around people after that. Every time I saw a child, I remembered those 7 faces pressed against the glass of the observation room, waiting for rescue that came too late. Sela's expression held no judgment, only a deep understanding that transcended species. Guilt is heaviest burden, heavier than chains my masters used. They didn't speak of it again that day, but something had shifted between them. A barrier had fallen, replaced by a tentative trust that neither had expected to find in the abandoned reaches of Carroll Station. The next morning, Marcus awoke to the sound of the station's alert system. Warning, approaching vessel detected. Identification protocols initiated. The automated voice echoed through the corridors, a sound he hadn't heard in over a year. He rushed to the command center, Sela close behind. The main screen displayed a small transport ship on approach vector, a company vessel based on its configuration. Inspection, Marcus realized aloud. The quarterly inspection. I lost track of the date. Sela stiffened beside him. Will they find me? Marcus checked the manifest that had begun streaming across a secondary monitor. 3-person team. Standard inspection protocol. They'll check life support, structural integrity, and resource consumption. They shouldn't have any reason to search the residential sectors thoroughly. But if they do? Sela's voice carried a fear that made the geometric patterns on the visible skin pulse with a dull light. We'll hide you, Marcus decided. There's a maintenance shaft connected to my quarters. It doesn't appear on the standard station schematics. You can stay there until they leave. They worked quickly, preparing the hiding place with water, rations, and blankets. The inspection team would typically remain for no more than 6 hours, a standard procedure that had become increasingly cursory as the company's interest in the station waned. As the transport ship docked, Marcus gave Sela final instructions. Stay silent. They won't have any reason to check that section. I'll come get you as soon as they leave. Sella caught his hand briefly, that strange energy flowing between them again. Be careful, Marcus. My presence puts you at risk. Worth it, he replied simply, before sealing the hidden compartment. The inspection team consisted of 2 technicians and a company representative. A woman whose crisp uniform and impatient demeanor suggested she considered this assignment beneath her. Maintenance Technician Ross, she greeted Marcus with a cursory handshake. I'm Administrator Keene. This is a standard quarterly inspection to ensure continued viability of Carroll Station. Of course, Marcus replied, keeping his expression neutral. I've prepared the system logs for your review. The next few hours proceeded according to protocol. The technicians methodically checked the life support systems, power generation, and structural integrity monitors. Marcus accompanied them, providing access codes and explanations for the various repairs he had completed. Administrator Keene, meanwhile, reviewed the consumption logs. Your resource usage has increased by 17% over the past month, she noted, frowning at her datapad. Particularly water and food supplies. Explanation. Marcus had anticipated this question. System recalibration, he answered smoothly. The water recyclers were showing efficiency drop. I ran multiple cleaning cycles to remove mineral buildup. As for the food, I've been testing the synthesizers across all sectors to ensure proper functionality. She made a note without looking up. And the increased power consumption in the residential section? Testing environmental controls, Marcus replied. The temperature regulation has been inconsistent. I've been running diagnostics in various cabins to isolate the problem. Administrator Keene's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded. Your maintenance logs should reflect these activities in detail. Of course, Marcus agreed. They're included in the weekly reports I've been transmitting. Which we haven't received, she noted dryly. Due to the continued malfunction of the communication array, a system that, curiously, remains unrepaired despite your otherwise thorough maintenance work. Marcus kept his expression carefully neutral. Parts shortage. I've requested replacements in 3 consecutive reports. Yet you haven't used the emergency beacon to highlight this critical failure, she observed. Interesting prioritization. Technician Ross. Before Marcus could respond, one of the technical inspectors called from the corridor. Administrator Keene, we've found something unusual in Sector 6. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, but maintained his composure as they made their way to the indicated section. Sector 6 was on the opposite side of the station from where Sella was hidden, but any deviation from the expected could lead to a more thorough search. The technician pointed to a control panel where a non-standard bypass had been installed. This modification isn't in any of the maintenance logs. It's rerouting power from the backup systems to somewhere else in the station. Administrator Keene turned to Marcus, her expression hardening. Explanation, Technician Ross. Temporary solution, Marcus replied, thinking quickly. The primary power conduits in Sector 8 were showing signs of degradation. Rather than shut down essential systems for a complete replacement, I installed the bypass to maintain operations while I work on the conduits section by section. The technician was checking his scanner. Power flow leads to the residential quadrant, specifically to sections that should be uninhabited, according to the station manifest. Marcus felt cold dread spreading through him. Sella's hiding place drew minimal power, but apparently enough to register on their detailed scans. Testing the environmental systems, he repeated his earlier explanation. I've been cycling power through different sectors to identify inefficiencies. We'll need to inspect the residential quadrant, Administrator Keene decided. All of it. That's not part of the standard inspection protocol, Marcus objected, trying to keep his voice even. Protocol adjustment is at my discretion when anomalies are detected, she replied coldly. Lead the way, Technician Ross. With no choice but to comply. Marcus guided them toward the residential section, his mind racing for solutions. They inspected cabin after cabin, finding nothing unusual until they approached the corridor leading to his quarters and to Sella's hiding place. Power readings are strongest from this section, the technician reported, consulting his scanner. Specifically from behind that bulkhead. Marcus stepped forward. That's a sealed maintenance shaft. It contains backup life support components. The increased power draw is probably from the auxiliary oxygen generators I activated last week after the fluctuations in Sector 7. Open it, Administrator Keene ordered. It's not a standard access point, Marcus argued. Opening it requires shutting down several critical systems temporarily. It's why I haven't included it in the regular inspection rotation. She crossed her arms. I'm not leaving until I see what's behind that panel. Technician Ross, either you open it, or I'll have my team cut through it. Marcus knew he had run out of options. The truth would come out one way or another. His mind raced through the consequences. Dismissal from his position. Certainly. Possible criminal charges for harboring an unregistered alien. And for Sella, capture, registration as company property, or worse. Administrator Keene, he began, choosing his words carefully. Before we proceed, there's something you should know about Carroll Station's current status. She raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The station has been operating under emergency humanitarian protocols for the past month, Marcus stated, invoking a rarely used company regulation. I've taken in a survivor from a transport accident. The technicians exchanged glances, while Administrator Keene's expression hardened further. No distress signals have been registered in this sector. No transport accidents reported. It wasn't reported, Marcus continued, because the transport was operating outside legal parameters. Smuggling sentient cargo. You're harboring an illegal alien, Keene concluded, her voice dangerously quiet. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Technician Ross. The company protocols are explicit. Company Humanitarian Directive 5.17, Marcus interrupted. Station personnel are obligated to provide emergency assistance to any sentient being in life-threatening circumstances, regardless of origin or legal status. The directive supersedes standard protocols regarding unregistered visitors. Administrator Keene's eyes narrowed. That directive is intended for temporary emergency situations, not extended harboring of unauthorized aliens. The directive specifies no time limit for humanitarian assistance, Marcus countered. Only that aid must continue until the affected party can be safely transferred to appropriate authorities, given the absence of communication with Central Command. I've been unable to arrange such a transfer. A tense silence fell over the corridor. Marcus could see Administrator Keene calculating her options, weighing company regulations against the potential complications of the situation. I want to see this survivor, she finally said. Now. Marcus nodded, then moved to the hidden panel, keying in his access code. Please understand, he said as the panel slid open. The survivor has experienced significant trauma. A cautious approach would be... But Administrator Keene pushed past him, peering into the maintenance shaft. The technicians crowded behind her, their scanners raised. Inside, Sella sat perfectly still, those reflective eyes wide with fear. Vathari, one of the technicians whispered, recognition and something else, avarice in his voice. It's a Vathari. Administrator Keene turned to Marcus, her expression unreadable. A Vathari empath, currently listed as a Class 3 protected xenospecies under corporate regulation. Unauthorized possession carries a minimum penalty of 15 years in a penal colony. I'm not in possession of anyone, Marcus replied firmly. Sella is a guest under humanitarian protection, not property. The use of a name visibly startled Administrator Keene. You've named it? Sella had a name long before arriving here, Marcus corrected, anger seeping into his voice. A name, a life, and rights that were violated by whoever was transporting her as cargo. The second technician had stepped closer to the opening. His scanner aimed directly at Sella. Interesting readings. This specimen appears to be... Step back, Marcus ordered, moving between the technician and Sella. She's not a specimen for your analysis. Administrator Keen's cold demeanor had transformed into something more calculating. Vithari empaths are extremely valuable. Technician Ross. Their abilities have applications in everything from medicine to high-level negotiations. The company would compensate you generously for bringing this find to our attention. The implication was clear. Report Sella as salvage, claim a finder's fee, and look the other way as the company took possession. The offer was designed to appeal to a man who had spent years in isolation on a dying station, a chance at wealth and a new beginning. Sella is not for sale, Marcus stated, his voice level, despite the rage building within him. Not by me, not by you, not by anyone. She's a sentient being who has already suffered enough from being treated as property. Behind him, he heard Sella move. Marcus, she said softly. It is okay. He turned to see her emerging from the hiding place, standing to her full height, despite the obvious fear in her eyes. The geometric patterns on her skin pulsed with a subtle light that seemed to emphasize her alienness. I understand what happens now, Sella continued, her accented voice steady. Have experienced this before. Will comply with registration procedures. No, Marcus protested. They have no right. Company regulations are explicit. Administrator Keen interrupted. All non-human sentient beings must be registered and processed according to xenobiological protocols. This Vithari will be transported to the nearest processing center for evaluation and appropriate placement. Appropriate placement, Marcus repeated bitterly. You mean sale to the highest bidder, research facility, private collector, pleasure house, as long as the company gets its percentage. Administrator Keen's expression hardened. You're making serious accusations. Technician Ross. The company operates within all legal parameters regarding non-human sentience. I've seen the parameters, Marcus replied. I helped develop them during my time at the Europa facility. A flicker of surprise crossed the administrator's face. You were part of the nutritional compliance system at Europa? I designed the oxygen management protocols, Marcus confirmed, including the emergency rationing algorithms that failed and killed 37 people. Understanding dawned in her eyes. You're that Marcus Ross, the one who... Yes, he cut her off. The one who miscalculated and cost those people their lives. The one the company quietly shipped off to this abandoned station, rather than face the public relations nightmare of a trial. He took a step toward her. So, you'll understand why I'm not particularly inclined to trust the company's humanitarian intentions toward Sella or any other sentient being. The corridor fell silent. The technicians looked uncomfortable, while Administrator Keen's expression had become unreadable again. Sella remained perfectly still, those reflective eyes moving between the humans as the tension built. Finally, Administrator Keen spoke. The company directive regarding your assignment to Carroll Station specifically prohibits you from interfering with xenobiological assets. Technician Ross, your history makes you particularly unsuited for such responsibility. I'm not interfering with an asset, Marcus replied. I'm protecting a person who sought refuge here, a person who has helped maintain the station, who has worked alongside me to keep systems running that the company has all but abandoned. The Vithari's utility is irrelevant to its legal status, she insisted. Her name is Sella, Marcus said, emphasizing each word. And her legal status is covered under Humanitarian Directive 517, as I've already established. Administrator Keen's patience visibly thinned. This conversation is becoming circular and unproductive. The Vithari will be transported to the processing center. You, Technician Ross, will face a disciplinary review for unauthorized harboring of a Class 3 protected xenospecies. She turned to the technicians. Prepare the transport pod for biological containment. Standard Vithari protocols. The technicians moved toward the exit, but Marcus stepped into their path. No, I won't allow it. You don't have the authority to prevent this, Administrator Keene stated coldly. Perhaps not, Marcus agreed. But I do have control over this station's life support systems. Systems that have been failing for years despite my best efforts. Systems that could, hypothetically, experience a catastrophic malfunction if tampering were detected. The implied threat hung in the recycled air. Administrator Keene's eyes widened slightly. You wouldn't... 3 years ago. I wouldn't have, Marcus replied quietly. But I've had a lot of time to think about corporate ethics since then. About the value placed on different forms of life. About who decides which beings deserve protection and which are considered assets. This is insanity, she hissed. You're threatening to kill us all over an alien empath. I'm suggesting that we find a compromise that doesn't involve treating Sela as property, Marcus corrected. One that allows you to complete your inspection and report that Carroll Station continues to function within acceptable parameters, while acknowledging the special circumstances of this humanitarian situation. Before Administrator Keene could respond, Sela stepped forward. May I speak? The administrator looked startled, as if she hadn't expected the alien to address her directly. After a moment, she nodded stiffly. I understand human laws, Sela began, her voice clear, despite the obvious tension. Understand registration requirements for non-citizens. Will comply with documentation, but ask for humanitarian exception for placement. Request asylum with current guardian. Guardian? Administrator Keene repeated, glancing at Marcus with new suspicion. Marcus Ross has provided shelter, food, protection, Sela continued. Has treated me as person, not property. Request formal recognition of guardian status under Directive 517, subsection 12. Marcus stared at Sela in surprise. The being had apparently studied company regulations far more thoroughly than he realized. Subsection 12 of the Humanitarian Directive did indeed provide for custodial arrangements in cases where standard processing was deemed potentially harmful to the subject. Administrator Keene's expression suggested she was equally surprised by Sela's knowledge of the regulations. Subsection 12 requires evaluation by a qualified xenopsychologist to establish potential harm. We have no such specialist on our inspection team. Then, perhaps, Marcus suggested, seeing an opening. The most appropriate course would be to document Sela's presence, register her biometric data as required, but maintain the current arrangement until proper evaluation can be conducted. At the company's earliest convenience, of course. The administrator's eyes narrowed as she considered the proposal. It offered a way to fulfill her official obligations without forcing an immediate confrontation. That would require you to accept full responsibility for the Vithari's conduct and care until such evaluation occurs. I already have, Marcus replied simply. After a long moment, Administrator Keene nodded curtly. Very well. We will document the Vithari's presence and establish provisional custodial status, pending formal evaluation. But make no mistake, Technician Ross, this arrangement is temporary. The company will send specialists to assess this situation properly. Of course, Marcus agreed, relief washing through him. We'll cooperate fully with any official evaluation team. The documentation process took another 2 hours. Sela submitted to biometric scanning with the quiet dignity that Marcus had come to associate with her. The technicians collected tissue samples, recorded her physiological parameters, and documented the identifying marks on her skin. Throughout the procedure, Sela remained stoic, though Marcus noticed the geometric patterns pulsing more rapidly, a sign of stress he had learned to recognize. When the inspection team finally departed, Sela and Marcus stood in the observation bay, watching the transport ship disengage from the docking clamps. They will return, Sela said quietly, with specialists who will determine I am not suitable for freedom. Probably, Marcus acknowledged. But not immediately. The company moves slowly, especially for a station they consider low priority. We have time. Time for what? Sella asked, turning those reflective eyes toward him. To figure out our next steps, Marcus replied. This station won't be viable much longer anyway. The primary reactor is showing signs of degradation that I can't repair with available resources. Within a year, maybe less, evacuation will become necessary. Sella's expression shifted in that subtle way that Marcus had learned to read as concern. Where will we go? The question caught him off guard. Not the practical concern, but the assumption that they would continue together, whatever came next. It had been so long since anyone had included him in their future plans that the simple "we" felt momentous. I don't know yet, he admitted, but we'll figure it out together. That evening, they sat in the observation dome, watching the distant stars through the reinforced glass. The station rotated slowly, bringing different constellations into view, patterns Marcus had memorized during countless solitary nights. Which direction is your homeworld? He asked, realizing he had never inquired about Sella's origins. The being pointed toward a faint cluster of stars barely visible at the edge of the dome. There, system humans call Lyra, third planet. Not like Earth. More water, less land, 2 moons. Do you have family there? Marcus asked carefully, conscious that the topic might be painful. Sella was quiet for a long moment. Had family, parents, siblings, lost contact when traitors took me. 7 cycles ago. I'm sorry, Marcus said softly. Do you think they're still there? Would you want to return, if it were possible? Do not know if possible, Sella replied, the patterns on her skin pulsing slowly. Vithari world now has restricted access. Human corporations claim resource rights. Many Vithari displaced. She turned those reflective eyes toward him. What about your family, Marcus? You never speak of them. It was his turn to fall silent. Memories he had long suppressed rising to the surface. My parents died when I was young. Colonist accident on Titan. I was raised in a corporate education facility. Not much family to speak of. Is why you accepted isolation here, Sella observed. No connections to break. Yes, Marcus acknowledged. After Europa, it seemed appropriate. A kind of penance. Sella's hand moved closer to his on the observation bench, not quite touching. May I? He nodded, and those long fingers gently wrapped around his hand. The now familiar energy flowed between them, but this time it felt different, less like being examined and more like a genuine connection. Your guilt has companion now, Sella said softly. Less overwhelming when shared. They sat in silence as the station continued its slow rotation, the stars sliding past the dome in their eternal patterns. Marcus realized that for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt filled with possibility. Days turned into weeks, and their routine evolved. Marcus continued to maintain the station's critical systems, now with Sella's increasingly valuable assistance. The being's knowledge of old space station architecture proved extensive, and together they managed to stabilize systems that Marcus had been fighting alone for years. More importantly, the station no longer felt like a prison. The corridors that had once echoed with his solitary footsteps now resonated with shared conversations. The galley, previously a place for functional refueling, became a space for exchange and connection as they experimented with food combinations that appealed to both human and Vithari palates. Marcus found himself laughing again, a sound that had been absent from the station for so long that it seemed to startle the recycled air. Sella's quiet humor emerged gradually, a subtle wit that caught him by surprise and delighted him each time it appeared. One evening, as they repaired a failing heat exchanger in Sector 3, Sella suddenly paused, those long fingers pressing against the wall. What is it? Marcus asked, noticing the being's stillness. Vibration pattern changed, Sella replied, head tilting in concentration. Primary reactor. Different harmonic. Marcus frowned, reaching for his diagnostic scanner. The monitoring system hasn't reported any anomalies. System would not detect, Sella explained. Too subtle. But Vithari sense vibrations differently. Pattern changed 3 days ago, growing stronger. Together, they made their way to the reactor control room. The automated diagnostics showed all systems functioning within normal parameters. But when Marcus ran a manual override sequence, the results confirmed Sella's observation. The reactor's containment field was experiencing microfluctuations, individually too small to trigger alerts, but collectively forming a pattern that suggested impending failure. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, studying the data with growing concern. "Cannot be precise," Sella admitted, "but based on progression, perhaps 8 weeks, 10 at most." The timeline was far shorter than Marcus had anticipated. He had estimated a year before evacuation would become necessary, but Sella's enhanced perception had detected the degradation much earlier than the station's aging sensors. "We need to accelerate our plans," Marcus decided. "The next supply drone is scheduled in 3 weeks. We could reprogram it, use it to transmit a distress signal from a safe distance. Company would respond," Sella noted, those reflective eyes studying him. "Would separate us." The simple truth hung between them. Any official evacuation would result in Sella being processed according to company protocols. Protocols that Marcus knew would not recognize the bond they had formed. "Then we need another option," he said firmly. "One that doesn't involve the company." They spent the next days reviewing possibilities. The station's emergency escape pods had been decommissioned years earlier, their components cannibalized for critical repairs. The sole remaining shuttle was designed for short-range transport only, without the life support capacity for extended travel. "What about the inspection team's transport?" Sella suggested, as they examined the station's docking logs. "Next scheduled visit is 6 weeks from now, before reactor failure." "It's possible," Marcus agreed, considering the idea. "Their transport has interstellar capacity. If we could commandeer it somehow." "Would require disabling inspection team," Sella pointed out, "potentially causing harm. Not acceptable." Marcus nodded, sharing the concern. Despite everything, he wasn't willing to risk others' lives, even to secure their freedom. "There has to be another way." The solution came from an unexpected source. While searching through the station's neglected inventory records, Marcus discovered a forgotten entry: a maintenance drone designed for external repairs, equipped with a small FTL transmitter for emergency communications. "It's not in the main inventory because it was classified as non-functional," he explained to Sella as they searched the storage bays. But, according to the maintenance logs, the actual issue was a faulty navigation system. The communication components were still operational. They found the drone in a sealed container in the lowest level of Sector 2, a squat, utilitarian machine covered in dust. Marcus spent days restoring its power systems and communication array, while Sella worked on reprogramming its simple AI to accept their commands. "Who will we contact?" Sella asked as they prepared the drone for deployment. "Not company, not authorities. There are independent operators in the outer colonies," Marcus replied. "Transport pilots who don't ask questions as long as you can pay. I have access codes for my emergency funds, enough to secure passage for both of us to the frontier territories." "Frontier territories have limited regulation," Sella noted, the geometric patterns on her skin pulsing thoughtfully. "Less protection, but also less control." "It's not ideal," Marcus acknowledged. "But it's a starting point. Somewhere we can determine our next steps without company interference." The day arrived to launch their makeshift messenger. They had programmed the drone with coordinates for a known independent trading post, along with an encoded message offering payment for discreet transportation from Carroll Station. The FTL transmitter would allow it to send the message from a distance that wouldn't be traced back to the station immediately. As they stood in the airlock, making final adjustments to the drone, Sela suddenly stilled, those reflective eyes closing in concentration. "What is it?" Marcus asked, recognizing the signs of Vithari sensory perception. "Something different," Sela replied, the patterns on her exposed skin pulsing rapidly. "Within me, change I did not expect." Marcus set down his tools, concern mounting. "Are you ill? The station's medical diagnostics are limited, but—" "Not illness," Sela interrupted, those eyes opening to fix on him with an intensity that made him pause. "Life. New life." The words took a moment to register. "You mean you're pregnant? But I thought you said—" "Reproductive capabilities damaged," Sela confirmed. "Not destroyed completely. Probability very low. Did not think possible." Marcus struggled to process this development. "How? I mean, was there someone else before you arrived here?" "Yes," Sela admitted, gaze dropping. "Final assignment before being discarded. Entertainment for transport crew. Did not think their species compatible enough for conception." The implication sent a wave of cold anger through Marcus, just when he thought he understood the extent of what Sela had endured. New horrors emerged. "I'm sorry," he said inadequately. I don't know what to say." "Nothing to say," Sela replied simply. "Past is past, but future now more complicated." Indeed it was. Their escape plan had been designed for two adults capable of enduring the hardships of frontier travel. A pregnancy, especially one involving a Vithari, carrying a hybrid child, introduced complications neither had anticipated. "How long?" Marcus asked. "The gestation period, I mean." "Vithari normally carry young for 11 Earth months," Sela explained. "With hybrid, uncertain. But based on sensations, estimate 2 months progression already." Marcus did the mental calculation. If the reactor failed in 8 to 10 weeks as predicted, and their rescue plan succeeded, Sela would still be several months from delivery during their escape. Difficult, but not impossible. "We'll adapt the plan," he decided. "Request medical supplies as part of the transport arrangement. Find somewhere with appropriate facilities once we're clear of company space." Sela studied him, those reflective eyes searching. "You still wish to help, knowing child is not yours?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "Of course. Why wouldn't I?" "Many humans value genetic connection," Sela observed. "Consider offspring of others as burden." "That's not—" Marcus began, then paused, recognizing the legitimate basis for Sela's concern. "The child is yours," he said finally. "That makes it important to me. The circumstances of conception don't change that." Something shifted in Sela's expression, a softening around those alien eyes, a subtle change in the pulsing patterns on her skin. Without warning, she stepped forward and placed her hand against Marcus's chest, directly over his heart. The energy that flowed between them this time was different from their previous contacts. Deeper, more complex, carrying emotions that transcended simple, empathic reading. Marcus felt a profound connection, as if Sela was sharing not just her current emotional state, but something more fundamental. "What you feel," Sela said softly, "is gratitude, trust, hope." The patterns on her skin glowed more brightly. "Emotions I thought lost forever. You restored them." They stood there in the airlock, the forgotten drone between them, as something unspoken, yet undeniable, crystallized in the recycled air. Marcus realized that what had begun as an act of basic humanitarian aid had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated, a bond that defied the circumstances of their meeting and the differences between their species. "We should launch the drone," he said finally, though he made no move to break the contact. before the reactor degradation advances further. Sella nodded, slowly, withdrawing her hand. Yes, future waiting, for all three of us now. They completed the final preparations and deployed the drone, watching through the external cameras as it disappeared into the vastness of space, carrying their hope for escape with it. All they could do now was wait and continue to monitor the failing reactor. The next few weeks passed in a strange mixture of tension and domestic tranquility. They established a routine of twice-daily checks on the reactor's deterioration, calibrating their estimates for its failure. Between these anxiety-inducing assessments, they prepared for both their hoped-for escape and the arrival of the child. Marcus repurposed materials from unused crew quarters to create suitable accommodations for an infant. Neither knew exactly what a half-Vithari child would need, but they developed contingency plans for various possibilities. Sella, drawing on her species' collective knowledge of child-rearing, instructed Marcus in Vithari traditions and care practices. "Our young require skin contact," she explained, as they modified a standard sleeping pod. "Emotional development through touch? Without it, empathic abilities do not form properly." "Will the child have those abilities?" Marcus asked. "Given its mixed heritage?" "Uncertain," Sella admitted. "But better to provide what might be needed than risk development problems." As the days passed, subtle changes became apparent in Sella's physiology. The geometric patterns on her skin developed a more pronounced luminescence, particularly around her abdomen. Her already slender frame adjusted to accommodate the growing life within, though the changes were less dramatic than in human pregnancy. Most noticeably, Sella began to sing, soft, harmonic vocalizations that she performed during quiet moments. When Marcus inquired about this new behavior, she explained that it was a Vithari tradition, a way of introducing the unborn child to vibrations and sounds it would need to recognize after birth. "Would you teach me?" Marcus asked one evening as they sat in the observation dome, watching the stars. "One of the songs. So I could participate somehow." Sella's expression shifted into what he now recognized as her version of a smile. "Vithari melodies different from human, many tones simultaneously." "I'll probably be terrible at it," Marcus acknowledged, "but I'd like to try." That night, Sella began teaching him a simple Vithari lullaby, a haunting melody that required producing multiple tones simultaneously, a skill humans generally lacked. Marcus's attempts were indeed awkward, but his earnest efforts seemed to please Sella enormously. "Not bad for a species with single-tone voice," she commented, the patterns on her skin pulsing with what he had learned to recognize as amusement. As the reactor's condition continued to deteriorate, they finalized their evacuation plans. The drone had successfully transmitted their message, and a response had come through the station's emergency frequency. A transport would arrive in 2 days, just ahead of their most pessimistic estimates for the reactor's failure. The night before their expected rescue, they sat together in Marcus's quarters, reviewing their preparations one final time. They had gathered the essential supplies they could carry, including medical equipment for Sella and the child. Technical data Marcus had accumulated during his years on the station, and a few personal items. "Hard to leave," Sella observed, looking around the sparse room. "First safe place in many cycles." "It was never meant to be permanent," Marcus replied. "Just a stopping point." Sella's reflective eyes studied him. "For you also. Punishment station becoming something else." "Yes," Marcus acknowledged. "Something unexpected." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the soft hum of the station's systems. After a while, Sella spoke again, her voice quieter than usual. When transport comes, what happens after? Between us?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Marcus had been so focused on the immediate challenge of escape that he had avoided examining his longer-term hopes too closely. "What would you want to happen?" he asked carefully. Sella's geometric patterns pulsed slowly, thoughtfully. Vithari bond differently than humans, through shared emotional states, not declarations or ceremonies. Already feel connected to you. Child will need stability, protection. Would prefer to maintain our arrangement. Arrangement, Marcus repeated, a smile tugging at his lips despite the gravity of their situation. Is that what this is? The patterns on Sella's skin flashed briefly, her version of embarrassment. Lack proper words in your language. In Vithari, would say kitharel, those who choose to remain together despite having freedom to separate. We have words for that too, Marcus said softly. Family, partners, home. Home, Sella echoed, the word seeming to carry special significance. Have not had home since leaving Vithari world. Only places of containment. Marcus reached out, offering his hand. After a moment, Sella placed her long fingers against his palm, the now familiar energy flowing between them. Whatever happens tomorrow, Marcus said, wherever we end up, we'll make it home. For all three of us. The geometric patterns on Sella's skin glowed with a steady, warm light as their fingers intertwined. Human and Vithari. Both damaged in different ways. Both finding unexpected healing in each other's presence. Morning brought final preparations. The transport was scheduled to arrive at 1500 hours, giving them limited time to reach the designated rendezvous point before the reactor's containment field collapsed completely. Their latest measurements suggested no more than 30 hours remained before catastrophic failure. As they made their way to the emergency docking bay, carrying their modest possessions, warning sirens began to sound throughout the station. Alert! Reactor containment degradation accelerating. Estimated time to critical failure, 3 hours. Emergency evacuation protocols initiated. They exchanged alarmed glances. The timeline had compressed dramatically overnight. Subharmonic shift, Sella explained, her sensitive fingers pressed against the corridor wall. Cascade failure beginning. The transport isn't due for another 4 hours, Marcus realized, cold dread settling in his stomach. We need to warn them. Have them approach with extreme caution. They rushed to the communication array, Marcus inputting the emergency codes to boost the signal strength. As the system powered up, another alarm joined the cacophony. Alert! Unscheduled vessel approaching. Corporate identification detected. Security protocols activated. Marcus checked the external scanners. Sure enough, a company transport ship was on approach vector. Not their arranged rescue, but an official vessel. The timing couldn't have been worse. They must have detected the reactor destabilization, Marcus theorized. Automated warnings would have triggered at headquarters. Or Administrator Keene sent specialists earlier than indicated, Sella suggested, the patterns on her skin pulsing rapidly with anxiety. To evaluate my status, either scenario complicated their escape plans catastrophically. If they boarded the company vessel, Sella would immediately fall under corporate jurisdiction. If they refused evacuation to wait for their arranged transport, they risked destruction when the reactor failed. We need a third option, Marcus decided. The station still has one functioning maintenance shuttle. It's not designed for long-range travel, but it could get us far enough away to rendezvous with our transport safely. They altered course, heading for the maintenance bay instead. As they navigated the increasingly unstable corridors, the station's computer continued its warnings. Reactor containment at 67%. Evacuation procedures mandatory. All personnel report to primary docking bay. The maintenance shuttle was exactly as Marcus remembered it. Small, utilitarian, and designed for orbital repairs rather than passenger transport. But it had minimal life support and enough fuel to reach a safe distance from the station. As they loaded their supplies, the computer announced, "Attention, corporate vessel docked. Evacuation team boarding. All personnel report for immediate extraction." "They'll begin a systematic search," Marcus warned. "We need to launch now." The shuttle's systems were basic, but functional. Marcus initiated the launch sequence while Sella secured their supplies. The small craft hummed to life, its ancient engines protesting but responding. Alert! Unauthorized shuttle activation detected. Security override initiated. Marcus cursed under his breath. They're trying to lock us down remotely. I need to disconnect from the station's network. His fingers flew over the control panel, bypassing safety protocols and severing the shuttle's connection to Carroll Station's central computer. The security warnings ceased, but new alarms took their place as the station's condition deteriorated further. Reactor containment at 43%. Critical failure imminent. Evacuation priority alpha. The maintenance bay doors began to close automatically as part of the station's emergency protocols. Marcus engaged the shuttle's thrusters, guiding it through the narrowing opening into open space. Behind them, Carroll Station's exterior lights flickered as power systems began to fail. We need to contact our transport, Marcus said, programming the shuttle's communication array. Let them know about the changed rendezvous point. Before he could transmit, the shuttle's sensors detected approaching movement. A smaller craft had launched from the company transport, a security vessel, based on its configuration. They're pursuing us, Marcus realized. They must have detected Sella's life signs. The maintenance shuttle wasn't designed for evasive maneuvers. Its engines strained as Marcus pushed them beyond recommended parameters, attempting to put distance between them and their pursuers. Message from security vessel, Sella reported, monitoring the communication panel, demanding immediate halt and return to station for evacuation processing. Ignore it, Marcus instructed. We need to reach these coordinates. He input the rendezvous point they had arranged with their independent transport. If we can hold them off for another hour, our ride should arrive. The security vessel was gaining ground, its superior engines easily closing the gap. The shuttle shuddered as a warning shot passed near its hull, not intended to damage, but to demonstrate the seriousness of the pursuit. Next, we'll disable engines, Sella observed calmly, though the patterns on her skin pulsed with tension. Standard procedure. Marcus knew she was right. The security team would be authorized to use disabling measures to prevent their escape, especially with the station on the verge of catastrophic failure. We need a distraction, he decided. Something to buy us time. As if in answer to his thought, the shuttle's sensors registered a massive energy surge from Carroll Station. The reactor's containment field was collapsing faster than predicted, the cascade failure accelerating beyond their worst estimates. All vessels, clear minimum safe distance immediately, came an automated broadcast on all frequencies. Reactor critical, detonation imminent. The security vessel's pursuit faltered as its crew processed this new information. Self-preservation overrode their mission parameters, and the craft veered away, accelerating back toward their transport ship. Marcus adjusted their course, pushing the shuttle's engines to their limits. The station's going to explode sooner than we thought. We need to get as far away as possible. The distance between them and Carroll Station increased steadily, but Marcus knew the maintenance shuttle wasn't designed to outrun a reactor detonation. Their only hope was that the station's structural design would contain some of the blast, directing the worst of it away from their position. Energy spike detected, Sella reported, her voice eerily calm. Containment failure complete. Through the shuttle's rear viewport, they watched as Carroll Station, Marcus's prison and sanctuary for 3 years, Sella's first place of safety in 7 cycles, erupted in a blinding flash. The shockwave hit them seconds later, tossing the small craft like a leaf in a hurricane. Warning lights flooded the shuttle's control panel as systems overloaded. Marcus fought with the manual controls, trying to stabilize their trajectory as the engines sputtered and failed. Life support damaged, Sella reported, checking the diagnostic panel. Oxygen recycling at 30% capacity. Estimate 4 hours remaining. It might be enough. Their rendezvous was scheduled in just under 3 hours, assuming their contact received their updated coordinates. The shuttle's emergency beacon was still functional, broadcasting their position continuously. As the turbulence subsided, they took stock of their situation. The shuttle was drifting, its engines offline, but its hull intact. Behind them, where Carroll Station had been, only a cloud of debris remained, illuminated by the fading energy of the reactor breach. "The company vessel?" Marcus asked, checking the sensors. "Appears to have cleared the blast radius," Sella confirmed. "Moving away at high velocity?" They had escaped, from the station, from the company, from the pursuit. Now they drifted in the void, waiting for either rescue or the slow depletion of their remaining oxygen. Marcus reached across the control panel, taking Sella's hand in his. The energy that flowed between them carried complex emotions: relief, fear, hope, determination. The geometric patterns on Sella's skin pulsed in harmony with the connection. "We'll make it," Marcus said, as much to convince himself as to reassure her. "Our transport will find us." Sella's reflective eyes studied him, then glanced down at their joined hands. "Already found what I searched for," she replied softly. "Everything else is additional benefit." As the hours passed, they took turns monitoring the communications array, listening for any sign of their arranged transport. The oxygen levels decreased steadily, and the temperature within the shuttle began to drop as life support systems struggled to compensate for the damage. Sella wrapped one of their thermal blankets around her abdomen, protecting the developing life within. "Child is resilient," she assured Marcus, when she noticed his concerned glance. "Vithari young, adapt to environmental changes. Evolutionary advantage from our homeworld's variable conditions." Just as the oxygen indicator dipped below 20%, the communication array crackled to life. "Maintenance shuttle, this is Independent Transport Horizon's Edge. Receiving your beacon. Prepare for retrieval." Relief washed through them as a sleek, unmarked vessel appeared on their sensors, approaching at a measured pace. The craft was clearly designed for speed and stealth rather than comfort, exactly the kind of independent operator they had hoped to contact. As the transport drew alongside their damaged shuttle, a docking tube extended between the vessels. Marcus gathered their few possessions, while Sella prepared for the transfer. "Ready?" he asked, standing at the airlock. Sella's reflective eyes met his, the geometric patterns on her skin pulsing with a steady, determined light. "Ready for whatever comes next." The airlock cycled, and they stepped from the failing shuttle into an uncertain future, together, carrying the promise of new life, leaving behind the isolation that had defined them both for so long. On the transport ship's bridge, the captain, a weather-beaten human woman with a network of scars across her face, greeted them with business-like efficiency. "Coordinates set for the outer colonies as requested. We'll be jumping to FTL in 20 minutes. Payment confirmation received. No questions asked, as agreed." Marcus nodded gratefully. "Thank you for the prompt rescue. The situation deteriorated faster than we anticipated." The captain's eyes flicked to Sella, noting her alien features and the subtle curve of her abdomen. But true to her word, she asked no questions. "Quarters are basic, but private. Medical bay is limited but available if needed. Make yourselves comfortable. It's a 3-day journey to the drop point." As the captain returned to her duties, Marcus and Sella were shown to their assigned cabin, a small but clean space with 2 sleeping platforms and minimal amenities. After the chaos of their escape, the quiet sanctuary felt like luxury. Sella moved to the viewport, watching as the remains of Carroll Station faded into the distance. The geometric patterns on her skin pulsed slowly, contemplatively. "Strange," she observed. "Place of confinement becoming place of beginning." Marcus joined her at the viewport. Endings and beginnings often happen in the same moment. Sella's long fingers found his. That now familiar energy flowing between them. Comfort, connection. The silent understanding that had grown between them in the abandoned corridors of a dying station. "What will we name the child?" Marcus asked, the question emerging spontaneously. Sella's reflective eyes widened slightly in surprise. Vithari tradition says naming comes after birth. When patterns appear on skin, patterns suggest name. Then we'll wait, Marcus agreed. See what patterns emerge. The transport ship's engines hummed as preparations for the FTL jump continued. Soon, they would be far from company space, in the loosely governed frontier, where beings of all species sought fresh starts and second chances. Are you afraid? Marcus asked quietly, sensing a subtle tension in the energy flowing between them. Yes, Sella admitted. But fear with hope, different from fear without hope. The patterns on her skin pulsed brighter. Fear with companion different from fear alone. Marcus understood perfectly. The uncertainty ahead was daunting, but it was vastly preferable to the isolated existence they had both endured. Whatever challenges awaited them in the outer colonies, they would face them together. As the countdown to the FTL jump began, Sella began to hum softly, the Vithari lullaby she had been teaching Marcus. After a moment's hesitation, he joined her, his single-toned human voice blending awkwardly but earnestly with her harmonics. The child within Sella shifted, as if responding to their improvised duet. The geometric patterns on her skin flared briefly with a warm light. The child hears us, Sella whispered, wonder in her voice. Recognizes vibrations. The transport ship shuddered as the FTL drive engaged. Stars outside the viewport streaked into lines, then disappeared altogether as they entered faster-than-light travel. Carroll Station, the company, the pursuit, all were left behind as they accelerated toward a new beginning. In the strange non-space of FTL travel, Marcus and Sella continued their lullaby. Their voices, one human, one Vithari, creating something new together. Something that, like the child growing within Sella, represented the possibility of connection across the vast differences that separated their species and their experiences. Neither had expected to find home in each other when Sella knocked on that outer hatch. Neither had anticipated that from such desperate beginnings could emerge hope, family, future. Yet here they were, traveling at impossible speeds toward an uncertain destination, having already arrived at the most important place, together. The silence between their songs no longer felt empty to Marcus. It felt full of promise, the promise of days ahead, of challenges to face as one, of a child to welcome and raise. Most of all, it held the promise that neither of them would ever again face the universe alone. Sella's hand tightened around his as the ship carried them onward. The geometric patterns on her skin pulsed in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Two different beings finding harmony in the vast darkness of space, creating light where before there had been only shadow. Home, Sella whispered, the word carrying all the meaning they had given it. Not a place, but a connection. Not walls and systems, but trust and hope. Home, Marcus agreed, as the stars streaked past unseen, carrying them toward whatever awaited in the endless possibilities ahead.